Dust rolled across the valley like breath from a sleeping beast. The sun was sliding low, bleeding gold over the hills when Grant Weller rode into the Callan ranch. His horse limped a little, same like him, both carrying the marks of miles and mistakes. The wind carried a sound, faint but steady, the clatter of a loose shutter, the creak of an empty corral gate. He pulled up at the fence and took in the place. The barn leaned, the fences needed fixing, and a woman stood on the porch with a rifle braced against her shoulder. She didn't shout a greeting, didn't wave, just watched him the way a hawk watches a coyote too close to her nest. "You, Nora Callan?" Grant asked, dismounting slowly, palms open to show he wasn't in trouble. "I am," she said. "You're the one Sheriff Danton sent?" "That's right. Name's Grant Weller." She studied him a long while before lowering the rifle. "I was told you were once a deputy." "I was," he said. "Once." The word hung between them like a fence neither wanted to cross. She nodded toward the barn. "Cattle's been taken 3 nights running. Whoever's doing it knows this land." Grant gave a small nod. "Then we'll make it hard for them to come back." From behind her skirts peeked a small boy, maybe 5. Dirt-smudged face, hair too long, eyes too sharp for a boy his age. He looked at Grant like a man seeing a ghost. The boy whispered something, tugging at his mother's dress. Nora hushed him, but Grant heard it clearly. "Papa?" Grant froze. For a breath all sound fell away. The wind, the creaking wood, even his horse's snort. The word struck deeper than a bullet. Nora's cheeks flushed. "Tommy, that's enough. Go on inside." The boy hesitated, still staring, before running through the door. "I'm sorry," she said, voice soft now. "He lost his father 2 years back. He says that to every stranger who rides up." Grant nodded, though something in his chest ached. Kids say what their hearts want, not what their heads know. She gave him a weary smile and turned toward the barn. "You'll bed the horse there. Supper's at sundown." Grant watched her go, her stride steady though her shoulders carried a world of weight. He led his horse to the barn, found a stall that didn't look like it'd fall apart, and started to work. The smell of dust, hay, and rusted iron filled the air, scents that never quite left a man's clothes or his memories. He thought of the boy's face, those wide eyes calling him Papa. It wasn't the first time he'd been mistaken for someone else, but this time felt different. The child had looked at him with something like recognition. As night fell, Grant sat at the small table inside the house. The place was tidy but bare, patches on the curtains, one chair mended with wire. Nora ladled stew into bowls and passed one to him. "You'll get your pay once the herd's safe," she said. "That's fair." They ate in silence for a while. The boy peeked from behind the doorway, eyes curious. Grant offered a faint smile. "You like horses, Tommy?" The boy nodded shyly. "Then maybe you can help me feed mine tomorrow." Tommy's face lit up. "Yes, sir." Nora gave Grant a look, half gratitude, half warning. "He'll hold you to that." "Good," Grant said quietly. "A man should keep his word." Outside, a coyote howled across the ridge. Grant's hand went to the old revolver at his belt, a habit that never died. Something in the wind felt off, too still, too watching. He'd only been here an hour, but already the land whispered of secrets buried deep and of ghosts that didn't stay gone. Morning came gray and cold. Fog lay thick over the pasture, softening the shape of the land. Grant was already awake, sitting on the porch steps with a cup of bitter coffee, when Nora stepped outside. Her hair was tied back, her eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. "Fence on the south ridge is down," she said. "I saw hoof prints near the creek." Grant nodded. "We'll check it after breakfast. You and the boy stay close to the house." "I can shoot," she said, chin lifting. "I don't doubt that," he replied, meeting her gaze. "But if they're scouting, they'll want to see how we move. Best not to show our hand yet." She didn't argue, only tightened her shawl and went back inside. Grant saddled his horse and rode out through the fog. The land unfolded slow, rolling hills, stretches of brittle grass, and the distant line of the river cutting through. He found the prints easy enough, fresh, 4 horses at least, moving light. Whoever came knew the ground well, When he reached the creek, he saw something half buried in the mud, a piece of burned leather. He pulled it free and turned it over in his hand. A brand mark, blackened but clear, a coiled snake inside a circle. Grant's jaw tightened. He'd seen that mark before, long ago. He rode back fast, the cold air biting through his coat. Nora was mending a gate when he came in. "Recognize this?" he asked, handing her the burned scrap. She stared, her hands trembling. "That's Boone's mark." "Laird Boone?" She nodded once. "He's the one who killed my husband." Grant went quiet for a long time. The name stirred dust he'd tried to leave buried. Boone. The man had once ridden under his command back when Grant still wore a badge. "You sure it's him?" "I'd know that snake anywhere," she said. "He branded one of our steers before he shot him, said he'd come back for what was his." Grant looked toward the horizon. Then he's keeping his word. That night the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Grant stayed awake, pacing near the window. He could feel eyes out there in the dark, testing the edges of the ranch. He checked the rifle by the door, loaded each shell slowly, steadily. At dawn, Tommy came running from the barn, shouting, "Mr. Weller!" "Someone's out there." Grant rushed out, rifle in hand. The tracks were fresh again, same snake brand in the dirt. But this time something else caught his eye. A trail leading toward the canyon road. He followed it halfway before stopping. A figure on horseback was watching from the ridge. Even from a distance, Grant could see the man's stance, loose, confident, mocking. Boone always rode like that. Grant raised the rifle but didn't fire. The man turned his horse and vanished into the canyon. When he returned, Nora stood on the porch holding her son close. "Was it him?" she asked. Grant didn't answer right away. Could be. Hard to tell through the fog. But his eyes said otherwise. That evening, while the fire burned low, Nora sat across from him. "You know him, don't you?" she asked quietly. Grant didn't look up from his cup. "I did once," her eyes narrowed. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because sometimes knowing a man's name doesn't help you sleep any easier," he said. Nora rose from her chair. "If he's coming, I deserve the truth." Grant finally met her gaze, and for the first time she saw the weariness behind it. "Truth has a way of cutting both ways, Mrs. Callan. You sure you want to bleed?" She didn't answer. Outside, thunder rolled far off like hooves in the distance. Grant knew it wasn't a storm. It was a warning. By the third day, the ranch felt different. Quieter, like the land itself was holding its breath. The cattle grazed close to the barn, uneasy. The dogs barked at shadows. Even the wind seemed to whisper Boone's name through the dry grass. Grant worked from dawn to dusk, fixing fences and checking trails. Nora helped him, silent most of the time, though her eyes followed his every move. She wanted answers he wasn't ready to give. When the sun dipped behind the ridge, Grant led the horses back into the corral. Tommy came running, holding something small and shiny. "Mr. Weller, look what I found by the creek." Grant knelt. It was a spent bullet casing, old but recently fired. His stomach tightened. "Where exactly did you find this, son?" Tommy pointed toward the north fence. "Over there near the willow trees." Nora came out, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's wrong?" Grant showed her the casing. "Means someone's been shooting near the house. Probably testing distance." Her face went pale. "You think they're watching us?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." That night he moved a chair near the window and kept his rifle across his knees. The firelight flickered over the walls, painting them in gold and shadow. Tommy slept in the next room. Nora sat across from Grant, her eyes weary but alert. "Tell me about Boone," she said finally. Grant stayed quiet for a long moment, then sighed. He wasn't always bad. Once he wore a badge similar to mine. We rode for the same marshal. He was wild, but he had charm. Folks liked him. Then one day gold went missing from a shipment we were guarding. Boone swore he didn't take it, but I knew better. He ran before I could arrest him. "So you chased him?" "For months," Grant said. But every time I got close, someone else wound up dead. Boone didn't shoot to win, he shot to send a message. Nora's voice softened. And my husband? How did he fit into this? Grant's hands tightened on the rifle. I don't know yet, but Boone doesn't pick his victims at random. If he came here, there's a reason. A knock sounded suddenly at the door, 3 hard raps that froze them both. Grant motioned for her to stay back and opened the door slowly. Sheriff Danton stood outside, hat low against the wind. Evening, the sheriff said. Heard there's been trouble out here. Trouble's been visiting nightly, Grant said. You find anything in town? The sheriff stepped inside, his boots leaving dust on the floor. Rumors, mostly. Folks say Boone's gang's been spotted near Iron Ridge. But there's something else. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to Grant. It was a wanted poster, yellowed, but the ink was still clear. Grant stared at his own younger face printed beneath the words wanted for aiding outlaw L. Boone. Nora looked from the poster to Grant, her voice shaking. Is this true? Grant said nothing. The sheriff cleared his throat. It's old, but some folks haven't forgotten. You want to tell me why this is floating around again? Grant handed the paper back. Because Boone wants it floating. He wants doubt before he comes riding in. The sheriff frowned. You planning to run? No, Grant said flatly. Not this time. After the sheriff left, Nora didn't speak for a long while. She just stood by the window staring out into the night. Finally, she said, You brought danger here, Mr. Weller. He looked at her, tired but steady. No, ma'am. Danger was already coming. I just got here first. The fire popped, sending a spark into the air. Outside, something moved near the barn, too big to be the wind. Grant stood, rifle in hand, heart heavy with the sound of the past catching up. The next morning, smoke rose thin and gray over the horizon. Grant spotted it while walking the fence line. The air smelled faintly of burnt wood. He climbed the ridge and saw a small cabin far off. Nothing but black timbers now. Someone's place had been torched during the night. When he returned to the ranch, Nora was tending the horses with a tight look on her face. I heard shots before dawn, she said. Sounded close. Not close enough, Grant replied. But Boone's gang is getting bolder. They're sending a message. Tommy ran up, clutching a wooden toy horse. Mama, Mr. Weller, are the bad men coming here? Nora knelt beside him. Not if we can help it, sweetheart. Grant crouched down beside them. You remember how I showed you to whistle loudly when you see strangers near the fence? Tommy nodded. Good. You do that again if you ever feel scared. You're our lookout, all right? The boy grinned a little, proud to have a job. After breakfast, Grant took Nora out behind the barn with a rifle. You said you can shoot. Let's see. She steadied herself, aimed at a tin can, and fired. The shot hit low, kicking up dirt. Grant smiled faintly. Not bad again. By the 5th shot, she hit the can square. Smoke curled from the barrel. You're a quick learner, Grant said. Fear's a fine teacher, she answered. They worked all afternoon, reinforcing doors, digging shallow trenches, checking blind spots. The sun burned hard over their backs, and every hammer strike echoed through the empty fields. When they stopped to rest, Nora sat on the porch steps beside him. You said Boone used to be a lawman, she said quietly. So what turned him? Grant's jaw tightened. Same thing that breaks most men, greed and pride. He wanted to own what he was meant to protect. And you? She asked. What broke you? Grant stared at the fading horizon. Silence. I knew what he'd done and said nothing. Thought justice would come on its own. It didn't. Nora looked at him for a long time. Maybe this is your chance to set it right. Before Grant could answer, the dog started barking. He was on his feet in a heartbeat, rifle ready. From the tree line, 2 riders appeared, waving white cloths. Grant motioned for Nora to stay back and stepped forward. The men stopped 20 yards away, rough-faced, their coats dusty, their eyes mean. Weller. One of them shouted. Boone sent us a message. Grant didn't lower the gun. Say your piece. The man grinned. Boone says you still owe him. Says the lady's land was part of a deal her husband made before he died. He wants what's his or he'll come take it himself. Grant's voice was cold. Tell Boone I don't owe him anything. The rider laughed. Then you best be gone before sundown, lawman. He doesn't like old friends turning up where they ain't wanted. They turned and rode off slowly like they owned the road. Grant watched until they vanished. When he came back, Nora was pale. What did they want? Same as always, he said. Something that doesn't belong to them. She looked at him, eyes full of questions. What did my husband have to do with Boone? Grant hesitated. I don't know yet. But Boone's not here for cattle. He's here for whatever your husband left behind. That night the wind shifted. Clouds rolled in heavy, the sky trembling with thunder. Inside the house, Nora tucked Tommy into bed while Grant checked every window. His heart beat slow and steady, the way it always did before trouble came. He sat by the fire watching the flames twist and curl. He could almost hear Boone's voice in the crackle, mocking, familiar, promising hell to come. Outside, somewhere in the dark, a horse neighed. Then silence. Grant reached for his gun. He knew this calm, the moment right before the storm breaks. Rain began before dawn, soft at first, then steady as nails on tin. The wind rattled the shutters and thunder rolled like wagon wheels across the sky. Grant stood on the porch, coat-soaked, scanning the tree line for movement. He didn't trust the sound of rain. It could hide too much. Nora joined him, wrapping a shawl tight around her shoulders. You think they'll attack in this weather? They might, he said. Boone's not the kind to wait for sunshine. Tommy peeked out from behind her legs. Can I help, Mr. Weller? Grant smiled faintly. You can stay close to your ma. That's the best help there is. When the rain eased, Grant saddled his horse and headed for the creek. The tracks from last night had already half washed away, but one mark remained. A boot print deep in the mud, fresh. He crouched beside it, studying the heel. A carved star. Boone's old trademark. He rose slowly, jaw set. Boone was closer than he'd thought. Back at the ranch, Nora was waiting near the barn. You found something? Yeah, he said. A message. What kind? The kind that means we don't have long. They spent the afternoon reinforcing doors and moving supplies into the cellar. Grant showed Nora how to reload the rifle faster, how to keep her hands steady even when fear pressed close. She listened, quiet and serious. By evening, a wagon rolled up from town. Sheriff Danton climbed down, mud splattered to his knees. Heard you've been getting visitors, he said grimly. We had 2 riders this morning, Grant replied. Boone's men. The sheriff's face hardened. Then he's near. I sent word to the county marshal, but he won't be here for days. That'll be too late, Grant said. The sheriff nodded. I figured you'd say that. So I brought something else. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and laid it on the table. It was a bounty notice. Boone's face drawn rough but clear. $500 dead or alive. Grant looked at the paper for a long moment. That won't buy much peace. The sheriff sighed. Maybe not. But it's a start. When he left, the house felt smaller somehow. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick and still, heavy with waiting. Later that night, Nora found Grant sitting by the fire, cleaning his revolver. The lamplight softened the lines of his face, but his eyes were sharp and far away. You ever get tired of fighting? She asked quietly. He didn't look up. You stop fighting, you stop living. She sat across from him. You don't have to do this alone. Grant's mouth twitched in something almost like a smile. I've done everything alone for a long time. It's what I'm good at. Then maybe it's time to learn something new, she said. He met her eyes, and for a moment the world went still. There was no rain, no outlaws, no ghosts from the past, just the sound of the fire breathing between them. Then Tommy cried out from his room. Grant and Nora ran down the hall. The window beside the boy's bed was open, the curtain fluttering in the wind. On the sill lay a small wooden horse, the same kind Tommy played with. But this one had something carved into its side, a snake coiled around a star. Nora clutched Tommy close, trembling. How did this get here? Grant picked up the toy, turning it in his hand. Boone's letting us know he's watching. But how could he get this close without you hearing? She asked. Grant's eyes hardened. Because he knows how I think. He's done this before. He looked out into the dark, rain still dripping from the eaves. Somewhere out there, Boone was waiting, close enough to smell the smoke from their fire. Grant tightened his grip on the wooden horse until the edges bit into his palm. This ends soon, he whispered, one way or another. By morning the air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of wet earth and smoke. Grant hadn't slept. He'd sat by the window all night watching the hills for any sign of movement. When the first light came, he saw boot tracks near the fence, fresh ones leading from the woods and circling back. Boone was testing them, closing in little by little. Nora came out with a blanket over her shoulders. You didn't rest? Couldn't, Grant said. He was here again last night, close enough to count the nails in the door. Her eyes flicked to the horizon. Why does he want this ranch so bad? That's what I aim to find out, he said. After breakfast, Grant searched the barn for anything out of place. He checked under floorboards, behind loose planks, inside tool chests. In the far stall, he found something wedged behind a feed bin, an old tin box rusted shut. He pried it open with his knife. Inside were folded papers and a small leather pouch. He opened the pouch first and poured out a handful of coins, Mexican gold stamped with a mine seal. The papers were worse. Land deeds and purchase notes all bearing the same name, Laird Boone. Grant's stomach tightened. He carried the box into the house. Nora looked up from the table, eyes wide. Where did you find that? In your barn, he said. Looks like your husband had dealings with Boone. These deeds, they're signed by him. She took one in trembling hands. No, that can't be right. My husband hated him. Maybe, Grant said softly, but this says otherwise. If Boone's coming here, it's not just revenge. He's after what he believes is his. Her face went pale. Then he'll never stop. Grant nodded slowly. Not until he gets it or until I stop him. Outside, the sound of hooves broke through the air. Grant rushed to the window. A rider was approaching fast, hat low, horse foaming at the mouth. It was one of Boone's men, the same one who'd come before. But this time he wasn't smiling. He reined up hard at the gate and shouted, Boone says tonight, he's taking back what's his, and anyone in his way burns with it. Grant fired a warning shot into the dirt near his horse's hooves. The man jerked back, spat in the dust, and galloped away. Nora came to stand beside him. So that's it? He's coming tonight? Grant's jaw was tight. He's giving us time to be afraid. I won't waste it. He spent the rest of the day preparing. He moved barrels near the porch for cover, checked the rifle sights, and loaded extra rounds. Nora helped without a word. When the sun began to sink, she handed him a lantern. For luck, she said quietly. Luck's for men who don't plan, he said, but he took it anyway. As night fell, a heavy stillness settled over the ranch. Tommy slept in the cellar, wrapped in blankets, while Grant and Nora kept watch by the windows. You should stay down there with him, Grant said. Nora shook her head. No, this is my land. My fight. The first sound came just after midnight, a distant crack like a branch breaking. Then another. Grant's hand went to his rifle. Through the darkness he saw movement. Figures spreading out, torches flickering between them. Boone's gang. Get ready, Grant whispered. The torches moved closer, lighting the edges of the field in trembling gold. Grant could see Boone now sitting tall in the saddle, grin cold and bright as steel. Grant Weller, Boone's voice rang out. You took what was mine once. I'm here to collect. Grant stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. You'll have to take it the hard way. Boone laughed, low and cruel. Wouldn't have it any other way. The first shot cracked the air and the battle began. The night exploded with gunfire. Bullets tore through the fences, splintering wood. Sparks from torches drifted across the dry grass, lighting small flames that grew fast in the wind. Grant fired steadily, each shot counted, each breath measured. Boone's men spread wide, yelling, trying to flank the house. Inside, Nora reloaded rifles as fast as she could. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. She passed the next rifle to Grant through the doorway.
"There are 3 on the left side of the barn."
"I see them," Grant called back, dropping one with a clean shot. A torch hit the porch rail, catching the wood. Flames licked upward. Grant kicked it away, grabbed a bucket, and doused the fire before it could spread. Smoke stung his eyes. Boone's voice rang out again through the chaos. "You always did like playing hero, Weller. How's that working out for you?" Grant shouted back, "Still breathing," and fired again into the dark. For a moment there was quiet, then the barn doors burst open. 2 men charged from inside where they'd already sneaked in. Grant swung his rifle and fired once, then again. One dropped. The other stumbled back into the shadows. Inside the house, Nora heard glass shatter. She turned and saw a shape climbing through the window. She didn't think, just grabbed the shotgun from the table and fired. The man fell backward into the mud outside. Her breath came fast. She reloaded with shaking fingers. "Grant!" she yelled.
"They're trying the back."
He ran through the kitchen and met 2 more at the rear door. One lunged, knife flashing. Grant caught the man's wrist and slammed him against the wall, the knife clattering to the floor. The second swung a rifle butt. Grant ducked and struck him hard across the jaw. Both went down. Gunfire outside slowed. The shouting thinned. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. For a brief moment the silence felt heavier than the noise. Nora stepped beside him, clutching the shotgun. "Is it over?" Grant shook his head. "No, he's not here yet." As if on cue, a single shot rang out, sharp, clean. The lantern on the table shattered. The front door creaked open, slow and deliberate. Boone stepped inside, his revolver still smoking. He looked older, scarred, but his grin was the same as ever. Too calm, too sure. "Always knew you'd hide behind a widow's walls, Grant. Never could stand out in the open." Grant raised his rifle, but Boone moved first, firing once. The bullet grazed Grant's shoulder, spinning him back against the table. "Easy," Boone said, laughing low. "Wouldn't want to ruin the reunion too quickly." Nora stepped between them, gun shaking in her hands. "You get out of my house." Boone glanced at her and smirked. "You've got fire, lady." "Shame your husband didn't." Grant forced himself upright, blood running down his arm. "Leave her out of this, Boone. It's me you want." Boone tilted his head. "Oh, it's never just you. You and I built this life. Lawmen, outlaws, same breed, just different badges. Don't pretend you didn't profit off it." "That was a long time ago," Grant said. "Not long enough." Boone's grin widened. "Your hands ain't clean, partner." The word hit like a knife. Boone aimed again, but Nora fired first. The blast tore into the wall inches from Boone's arm. He stumbled, cursing, and fired wildly. Grant grabbed his revolver from the table and dove behind the doorframe. For a heartbeat, both men froze, waiting for the other to move. Then Boone laughed softly. Still quick, even with guilt weighing you down. Grant's voice was steady. "You talk too much." He stepped out and fired once. The bullet caught Boone's hat, spinning it off his head. Boone ducked behind the doorway, then ran outside into the storm of fire and smoke. Grant followed him into the yard, every muscle burning. The barn was ablaze now, orange light spilling across the fields. Boone stood in front of it, pistol raised, face glowing in the firelight. "Come on, lawman," he called. "Let's finish what we started." Grant stepped forward through the smoke, gun steady, eyes cold. "We will." Flames cracked around them, throwing sparks into the night. The barn burned like a beacon, lighting the 2 men who stood facing each other, Grant Weller and Laird Boone. Smoke curled between them, carrying the bitter smell of hay and gunpowder. Boone's grin was wild, his teeth catching the firelight. "Feels familiar, don't it? You and me standing in the dirt, guns drawn like old times." Grant's voice was low but steady. "Old times are gone," Boone laughed. "You can lie to the widow, to the boy, but not to me. You were just like me once. You liked the chase, the danger, the respect. Only difference is I never pretended to be better." Grant kept his aim firm. "You killed innocent men. You killed her husband. Boone tilted his head. Innocent? That man was no saint. He ran stolen cattle for me until he got greedy. Tried to double-cross me. I just corrected the mistake. Grant's eyes hardened. You murdered him. Boone shrugged. He drew first. Grant's voice rose sharp. He had a family. Boone smiled wider. And now you're trying to replace him. That's rich, partner. The word partner burned more than the flames around them. Grant took one step forward. You lost your soul long before the gold, Boone. Boone cocked his revolver.
And you lost your nerve. He fired.
The bullet grazed Grant's sleeve, burning his skin. Grant dropped low, rolled, and returned fire. The shot ripped Boone's hat clean off. They circled each other through smoke and firelight. The barn groaned as beams began to fall. Sparks showered down around them. Boone shouted through the roar of the flames. This land was bought with my money. It's mine. Grant fired again, forcing Boone back. You burned that claim the day you killed for it. Boone stumbled against a fallen beam but steadied himself, rage twisting his face. Then we'll both burn with it. He aimed for the barn loft and fired, hitting a hanging lantern. Oil spilled and fire raced across the ground. Grant dove aside as heat washed over him. He could hear Nora shouting from the porch, her voice breaking through the crackle. Grant, get out of there! But he couldn't, not yet. Boone was limping toward the corral, smoke curling behind him. Grant followed, boots sinking into wet ash. Boone turned, firing again. The bullet grazed Grant's ribs. Pain flared hot, but he didn't stop. He raised his revolver, breath steady. This ends now, Grant said. Boone sneered. You think you're the law? You're just another sinner hiding behind a badge that doesn't shine anymore. Grant hesitated for half a second, and Boone saw it. He raised his gun fast, but Grant was faster. One shot cracked the night. Boone stumbled back, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He dropped his gun, eyes wide with disbelief. Always did. Shoot straighter, he muttered, voice fading. He fell backward into the burning grass. Grant stood still for a moment, breathing hard. The rain began again, soft and cold, hissing against the flames. Boone's body lay still. Nora came running, clutching Tommy in her arms. Grant, are you hurt? He shook his head slowly. Not bad. It's done. She looked at Boone's body, then at the burning barn. The cattle, everything. Things can be rebuilt, Grant said quietly. People can't. She nodded, tears mixing with the rain. Then let's start over. Grant turned toward the flames. Something caught his eye. Papers blowing free from Boone's coat pocket. He picked one up. It was one of the stolen deeds Boone had used to claim her land. Nora saw him holding it. That's proof. It could clear your name. Grant looked down at it, then at the fire. Some things are better buried. He dropped it into the flames and watched it curl into ash. The fire began to die with the rain, leaving the smell of smoke and wet earth. Boone was gone. The storm had broken. Grant stood in the rain, shoulders heavy but lighter somehow inside. The past had finally caught him and passed through. The fire burned itself out by morning. Smoke drifted across the pasture, thin and gray like ghosts fading at dawn. The barn was gone, but the house still stood, blackened around the edges. The land smelled of rain and ash. Grant walked the fence line, his shirt torn, ribs aching. Every step reminded him he was still alive. Boone's body had been buried before sunrise near the ridge. No marker, no name. Just a mound of dirt for a man who had once been his friend and had turned into his shadow. Nora stood on the porch, her dress streaked with soot. She held Tommy close as the boy watched Grant in silence. The wind tugged at her hair. She looked tired but not broken. When Grant came closer, Tommy ran toward him. You beat the bad man, the boy said, his face bright with pride. Grant smiled faintly and crouched to his level. It's over now, Tommy. You and your ma are safe. Tommy looked up at him, eyes wide and trusting. Will you stay with us, Papa? The word hit Grant like a shot. He froze, unsure what to say. Nora stepped forward quickly, her voice soft. Tommy, he's not your... But Grant raised a hand. It's all right, he said quietly. He rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. You be strong for your ma now, you hear? Tommy nodded, not understanding, and hugged him tight before running back to the porch. Nora's eyes met Grant's. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Grant looked out at the horizon. The sheriff will come soon. Boone's gone, but the law doesn't forget. My name's still written on the wrong side of too many papers. She stepped down from the porch, her boots sinking into the wet dirt. You saved us. The town will see that. He shook his head. Maybe. But word travels fast out here, and not all of it is true. The sheriff arrived by noon, his horse kicking up mud. He nodded to Grant as he dismounted. Heard there was a fight. Grant said nothing. The sheriff looked toward the smoldering barn, then at the fresh grave on the ridge. Boone's gang? Finished, Grant replied. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. You did the territory a favor, but I got word from Kansas. There's still a warrant out for a man named Wade Turner. Grant's jaw tightened. That was his old name. Never heard of him. The sheriff's mouth twitched in something like respect. Good. Then I won't be seeing him around. He tipped his hat to Nora and rode off without another word. Nora turned to Grant, confusion and relief mixing on her face. He let you go. Grant gave a small nod. For now. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, lighting the wet grass with gold. Nora looked at the land, the fences, the burned barn, the empty corral. It'll take months to rebuild, she murmured. Grant glanced around, his voice gentle. You'll do it. You're stronger than you think. She looked up at him. Not without help. He smiled faintly, though his eyes were sad. You've got half the town owing you favors now. They'll come running when they hear Boone's gone. Nora's voice softened. And what about you? Where will you go? He looked toward the hills, distant and blue. Somewhere the law's memory runs short. Maybe Montana, maybe nowhere. For a moment neither spoke. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper. Nora finally said, You could stay. At least until the barn's rebuilt. Grant hesitated. If I stay, Tommy won't understand when I leave again. Her eyes glistened. Then maybe you don't have to leave. He looked away. I can't promise him a life that keeps running. Nora nodded slowly, accepting even what hurt. Then at least promise you'll come back when you can. Grant met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. A quiet understanding that love, in this land, was built from courage and goodbye. He turned toward his horse. Tommy waved from the porch, small hand high in the air. Grant raised his hand in return, a rough smile tugging at his mouth. Take care of them, Sheriff's Deputy Tommy. The boy laughed, not knowing it would be the last time he'd hear that voice for a long while. Grant mounted up, the saddle creaking beneath him. The land stretched wide ahead, empty, free, and unforgiving. He took one last look at the woman and child standing in the light of their ruined home. Then he rode on, the hoofbeats fading into the quiet morning. The morning sun climbed higher, burning the mist off the valley. The sky stretched wide and pale blue, the kind that promised a long road and few answers. Grant rode slowly along the ridge, every hoofbeat steady against the earth still wet from last night's storm. Behind him, smoke still rose from what was left of the barn. Ahead lay miles of wild land, open prairie, silver streams, lonely wind. He'd ridden trails like this before, carrying guilt heavier than his saddle. But this time something in him felt different. Lighter. He stopped near the ridge to look back. From that high ground he could see the ranch, Nora and Tommy standing by the fence, just two small shapes against the broken land. The sight hit him harder than he expected. He thought about Tommy's voice calling him Papa, about the look in Nora's eyes when she said he'd given her boy courage. He wasn't sure if he deserved those words, but they stayed with him. The wind tugged at his coat, carrying the smell of rain and pine. Grant closed his eyes for a moment. Boone was gone, but his memory wouldn't vanish so easily. There were things a man could bury in the ground and others he carried forever. He turned his horse toward the open trail. The sound of the creek below reminded him of quieter days, when the world still seemed fair and justice was simple. He almost smiled at the thought. Those days were gone, but maybe something better waited down the line. As he rode on, his mind wandered back to Nora's words. You protected more than my land, Grant. You gave my boy a father's courage. Those words echoed in him, steady as a heartbeat. Maybe that was what redemption looked like. Not a clean slate, but learning to live with the marks you've earned. The trail wound down toward the plains. A herd of wild horses grazed nearby, lifting their heads as he passed. One of them, a gray mare, stepped forward, watching him with calm eyes. Grant slowed his horse and nodded, almost in greeting. You're free, he whispered. Run while you can. The mare snorted and galloped off, her hooves drumming the ground in rhythm with his own. He rode until the sun sat high above, warming his back. Somewhere behind him, he imagined Nora hammering a new fence post, Tommy running through the grass shouting about helping. He could almost hear their laughter carried by the wind. Maybe someday, when the law forgot his name and the scars healed over, he'd find his way back there. Not as a fugitive or a hired gun, but as a man ready to live again. But for now, the road was where he belonged. The frontier had a way of testing a man's soul, burning away what didn't matter until only truth remained. He passed through a stretch of tall grass, the kind that brushed the stirrups and whispered secrets only the wind knew. He thought of all the towns he'd ridden through, the men he'd buried, the nights spent under cold stars. Each one had brought him here, to this quiet, bittersweet peace. By evening, the light turned golden. Grant stopped at a small hill overlooking the valley. From there, he could see forever. He dismounted, let his horse drink from a puddle, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel hunted. He pulled out a small object from his pocket, the locket Nora had returned to him that morning. Inside was a faded photograph, half burned at the edges. He closed it gently and placed it back against his chest. Goodbye, Boone, he murmured. Rest where you can't hurt no one. Then softer. And thank you, Nora, for giving me a reason to stop running. He climbed back into the saddle and turned toward the west, where the sun melted into the horizon. His shadow stretched long behind him, fading into the dust. When night finally fell, the stars came out bright and endless. Grant rode beneath them, a lone figure on a quiet trail, no longer just an outlaw or a lawman, but something in between, a man forgiven. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like and subscribe to Shadow Frontier Tales. Every story here keeps the spirit of the old frontier alive, where loss, love, and redemption still ride together under the same wide sky. Stay with us. More tales are on the trail ahead.